This video is going to be looking at linear equations, and there are three types of linear equations that can result: a conditional, an identity, or a contradiction. Some books will say inconsistent. Our book says a contradiction. So a linear equation is one where you just have one variable, x. So x is a variable. Variable means it can take on any value you want. It will change, and it can be it can be written like this. Now, a and b are just fixed real numbers. So that's a linear equation. That's a linear equation because you can turn it into this form by adding 2 to both sides. So basically, a linear equation only has one variable in it, and the power of your variable is just 1. This is not a linear equation. This is a quadratic because it has degree 2. The highest power of x is 2. For the purposes of the lab sheets and on the tests, the variables are almost always x. Now, sometimes in web work, they'll have a different variable. Okay, so you can see here that this is a linear equation, and the variable is r. So what do we mean by conditional, identity, or contradiction? An equation that is satisfied by a specific solution is called a conditional equation. So if you rewrite your equation and you get x equal to a number, so a single number, a single value, that will be a conditional equation. If you have an identity, then x can be anything and it will make the equation true. So how do you know you have an identity? Well, if when you're trying to simplify it, your x terms cancel. So if your x term cancel and then what you're left with is a true statement, you have an identity. And then an equation that doesn't have any solution is called a contradiction, or it's called inconsistent. And how do you know you have a contradiction? Well, when you're gathering like terms, when you're simplifying, your x variable will cancel out, and what you'll be left with is a false statement, like something like that, and that's a false statement. So if you have a false statement, you'll have a contradiction. So I've got examples here of each type. And so let's look at this first one and see what that is going to be. So I'm going to come over here and let's solve this one. Okay, so, and all the steps are in the lab sheets. First thing I'm going to do is distribute the -4 through. And -4 times -5 is +20. Then I have 3, and then I'm going to distribute the negative sign through, -8x -7. Then I'm going to gather like terms, which there are not any like terms on this side. But 3 minus 7 is -4. And then what I'll probably do is I want to get all of my x's on one side. So let's add 12x to both sides. If I do that, then I'm left with 20 is equal to -4. And 12x minus 8x is 4x. And then let's add 4 to both sides. And so that will cancel. And then to get x by itself, which is the goal, let's divide both sides by 4. And so after I do that, I have x over here, and 24 divided by 4 is 6. So I have a specific value for x. This is a conditional equation. And let's go back to the lecture notes, the lab notes. Okay, so there they are, the steps there, and we have a conditional equation. So when you are in your web work, So let's look at lab 8. Here you just asked to solve. So if this had been the one that we were just doing, then you would have written 6. If it was an identity and there were infinitely many solutions, you would type in the expression infinitely many. If it was a contradiction or inconsistent and didn't have any solutions, you would type in no solutions. So that's what you would do for that one. This one, again, it's like the last one, but you have to actually give what kind was it. So again, pretend that we just solved the problem that we did in the lab. Okay, so for the one we did in the lab, that would have been a conditional. And we would have had x is equal to 6. Okay. Now notice here the selections are conditional, identity, or contradiction. For the next one, the selections are conditional, identity, or inconsistent, which is the same as contradiction. So these are taken from different textbooks. Okay. Now here the variable is y. So, and here the variable is t. So again, on the web work ones, they'll have other variables besides x. But in the course and in the notes, we'll use x, and on the tests and final, it's mainly x, but you do see other letters pop up. So just remember the variable here is y, so you're solving for y. Okay, the variable here is t, so you're solving for t. All right, so let's go back and do some more. Let's look at example 2. And let's solve that one. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is get rid of the fraction. And the way you can get rid of the fraction is, well, if I come here, I can get rid of this fraction if I multiply it by 5. But what I do to one term, I have to do to every term. And multiplying this one by 5 would not get rid of the fraction. But notice here I have a 10 in the denominator. Now, if I multiply that one by 10, that's gone. If I multiply this one by 10, then I will no longer have a fraction, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. If I multiply this one by 10, the fraction's gone. So 10 is 2 times 5, and so it's the lowest common denominator. And so I'm going to multiply everything by 10. So every term has to get multiplied by 10. Now we have cancellation. The 10s here will cancel. And I'm just going to be left with 3x plus 6. Then I'm copying the minus sign. And 10 divided by 2 is 5. So after the cancellation, I'll have 5. And I'll be left with 5x. Here, 10 divided by 5 is 2. So after the cancellation, I'll have 2. And 2 times 2x is 4x. And 10 divided by 5 is 2. And 2 times 33 is 66. Now let's gather like terms over here. 3x minus 5x is negative 2x. Then I have a plus 6. Okay, now if I want to solve for x, it's a good idea to get x on the left-hand side. If I do that, it'll make it negative, but I can sort that out later. So if I subtract 4x from both sides, negative 2x minus 4x is negative 6x. And then subtract 6 from both sides. So that will cancel, and I'll have negative 6x equals 66 minus 6 is 60. And now to solve for x, to get x by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 6. All of these steps should be familiar to you. You should have met this kind of solving in before you've come to this course. And 6 divided by -6 is -10. So once again, I have a single solution for x. And so this is a conditional equation. Okay, so let's check this with our lab sheet. And there we have it. And all of the steps are there. And so this is a conditional. Let me make sure. Okay. So it's spilled over to the next page, so I'm just going to need to, there we go. Solution set is -10. We have a specific solution for x, thus the original equation is a conditional. So let's have a look at this. Let's see if we can solve that one and see what we get. Okay, so that's just a smudge, I think. Let me check. You want to make sure and get the correct equation. Yeah, okay. All right, so that's a smudge. Okay. So let's work this one out. First thing I'm going to do is to distribute that -3. -3 times 2x is -6x. And -3 times -1 is +3. Then plus 5x equals 3 minus x. I'm going to gather like terms. -6x plus 5x is -1x, which is -x. Now, I'm going to add x to both sides. But what happens when I add x to both sides? So I want to get rid of the x term, get it to the other side. That cancels, but that also cancels. Now, what's happened? The x's have canceled. The x terms canceled, so we don't have any more x terms left. And the equation I'm left with is 3 equals 3, which is true. So we have an identity. The type of equation is identity. And what x will make this true? Well, if your x's cancel and you have a true statement, any x will make this true. So x can be any real number. So the solution is all real numbers, or if you were going to write it in interval notation, it would be that. And so now let's just check it over here. Our variable x canceled out and we're left with a true statement. That's the original equation is in identity. There are infinitely many solutions for x, so it doesn't matter what x is, this will always be true. And the solution is all real numbers. Okay, so if we go to web work, so suppose I just had the problem that I solved. Then I would have chosen identity and then enter the numerical answer. So if it had been a conditional, I would have put the number in, or all real numbers or no solution. If it's an identity, your solution is going to be all real numbers. So I'm going to type in here all real numbers. Okay, so that was for the one I just did, not for the one that's on the screen. That's how I would have answered that. Okay, and then finally the last type. Let's look at this example. And let's solve this guy. Okay, so I'm going to distribute the 4 through. I get 4 times x and 4 times 7. Then I'm going to distribute the 2 through, 2 times x plus 2 times 12. Then plus 2 times x plus 2 times 1. So nothing to simplify on this side. Over here, 2x plus 2x is 4x. And 24 plus 2 is 26. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to try and get my x terms on one side. So I could subtract 4x, but you have to do the same thing to both sides. And again, notice that the x's are canceling. So the variable x is canceled. And we're left with, what are we left with? 28 equals 26. That is a false statement. So when your variables cancel and you're left with a false statement, what you have is a contradiction. Or, so our textbook says contradiction, or other textbook would say this equation is inconsistent. And so this equation has no solutions. There are no solutions for x. So the solution set would be the empty set, or you'd have the null set symbol. So let's see how we would do it in, again, let's check. Okay, so those are the steps. This is another video that someone else has made on YouTube, but it's a well-made video, so I've just stuck it in there if you want to watch it. Let's go back to here. Now, suppose I had just worked out the one that we did together, okay, again. So this time we had an inconsistency or a contradiction. So the word you want to use here is inconsistent. And if you have a contradiction or if your equation is inconsistent, there are no solutions. So I'd type in no solution. Just be careful, type it in the way they want. If you type in no solutions with an S on it, it might not accept it. It might want you to capitalize the first one to where it looks exactly like that. Now, if you put in the empty set symbol, in theory, that is correct, but you're not following the instructions that say no solution to type that in, okay? This one, I would have found contradiction is the one I want. And it says to type in no solution. And so that's what I would have typed in. If this was a final exam, usually the department in the final exam writes in the null set symbol or the empty symbol. Okay, so everyone should have an idea how to do your lab. And again, I've posted a link for another video that looks at more problems if you want to see more problems. But you should have, we've gone through every type, and you should have plenty to complete your lab now. So I'm going to stop.